Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. Today's podcast with Kendra Ramirez is a great one. She runs her own digital agency, but yeah, she's just been a student of the mind and learning about mindset and coaching, entrepreneurship. So a wealth of knowledge, but yeah, she's also had a lot of adversity that helps kind of tell a story that is inspiring, from depression, divorce, bankruptcy, but yet now she's got a thriving business. There's a lot to learn of one, how she came out of the valley, but also the daily habits she has to continue to be successful. And it's an awesome episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. On to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. You're listening to Win at Home First podcast. Today I'm joined by Kendra Ramirez, and she is a wife, a mother, a business owner. She owns her own digital agency. And so just having success in all different areas and a strong woman in her faith. So I wanted to invite her onto the podcast so we could learn from you, Kendra. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate it.
Kendra, what is the key trait for leaders to win at work and win at home?
Really, one of the things, if I could go back and tell myself in the early days when I first became a leader, is ask more questions. Because I thought a leader meant we had the answers. I thought leadership was people would turn to me for answers. And that's not true at all. So it was understanding that I don't have to have the answers, but I have to empower my team to be willing to be vulnerable and say when they didn't understand something, or share their knowledge, their wealth of knowledge with the rest of the team members, and really make it more collaborative. And just as a leader, asking more questions versus trying to always provide those answers. And then just leaning in on those uncomfortable things, right? Those tough conversations you don't want to have, being able to just lean into that discomfort, because otherwise it's just going to turn into resentment. So it's a lot easier just to have that conversation versus allowing it to kind of fester and drag on. And then your other team members are looking at you going, why didn't you pull the trigger on that situation that needed to take place?
Mm-hmm. Ask more questions. Great answer, and so helpful and applicable. How does that work in your marriage? Ask more questions.
My husband and I, we spend a lot of quality time in kind of debriefing from a day's perspective. And in that time, we're able to ask each other, how's your day going? And what went well? And my husband is just such an awesome leader. I love hearing him. He's in commercial construction and deals with very difficult and sometimes safety concerns, and tempers flare because things aren't going. And he's just so calm natured that he knows how to diffuse a situation. And so he grounds me in the most beautiful way, because I'm type A, I'm 900 miles a minute. And so when we're able to have those debriefs, from the day, and being able to see him show up as a leader really inspires me.
So talking to the female relationship, usually it's the female who's good at asking questions, the man is not. How do you encourage us men to be better at wanting to ask questions, wanting to sit and answer questions, as opposed to just be quiet?
Oh, and that totally is in our marriage as well. I'm the extrovert, my husband's the introvert. And what I find is just finding those little opportunities, either at the dinner table. We have a hot tub and we have lots of amazing conversations in the hot tub. And I found that it's more of just the side-by-side conversation versus the sitting across the table from each other. And I do that with my son as well. I have so many more wonderful, beautiful conversations when I'm in the car with my son versus sitting across the table. And I really think it's rooted in the early days of being threatened when someone is eye to eye to you. I think that's in part of our DNA. But when you come alongside and sit side by someone, it really opens up the lines of communication. And that's something I really wish I knew early in my relationship, with my son, And I really just kind of fell into it, driving to school. And I'm like, gosh, he is way more talkative when we're in the car versus at the dinner table. And then there's some amazing tools out there that, little cards that you can share the prompt questions. And early days, those were a lot of fun as well. And just there's going to be times where we're just chatty. And then there's going to be times where there's just not a lot to, cover. Yeah, day was good. Maybe really digging into specifics instead of saying, how was your day? Tell me one thing you learned today, right? Or tell me one thing that was a challenge today. When we get a little bit more specific in our actual questions, it really opens up the conversation.
I like how your marriage, you have the hot tub, almost like this destination, like kind of like when we go in here, like this is where we talk. And so I think that part for every couple, my cousin, they've kind of got this for his son and him. They have this safe couch. Kind of when we go to the couch, you can talk about anything you want. You're not going to get in trouble. I mean, there may be a minor consequence or something, but this is the safe place. You ask all your questions. You tell me kind of what's going on. And so I kind of like the idea that you're having there is some destination type conversations. And then as far as your son driving around, I completely agree. It drives me crazy when I pull up to an intersection, I see a kid in the passenger seat with his earbuds in. They're not talking at all. And so it's just a good reminder to all of us, one, make sure the kids don't have, the earbuds in, but also for us, like, don't have a work call. Do your best not to have a work call or listen to podcasts, but instead just turn it off and just talk. Because I agree, to and from dance or gymnastics or soccer for us, there's some great conversations there. And so you and your husband both super busy. Obviously, construction's going crazy right now. You can't keep up. Your job's demanding, a digital agency. How do you two basically just kind of manage both pushing hard? You obviously have a kid, and so how does that work in your guys' marriage to balance both careers but yet have time for each other?
Yeah, the week is during the work week is probably when we both go hard and allowing that conversation time in the evenings. But it's the weekend when we both unplug. We have property in a home in Indiana, and so it's 10 acres. And so that's our getaway on the weekend. So we have a dog and we load her up and we, head out and go out there, for the weekends. And there's always house projects. We used to have renters in the home for several years, and we've decided, no more renters. And we started that last May. And so we've just been renovating the house since last May. And that just has been this awesome project for both of us. And we get to use our hands, we get to use our creativity, and we play and we love our neighbors. And we also have a Polaris General, which is a side-by-side, and we ride trails together. And we just have so much, we truly enjoy spending time, like that. You're going to find this really funny, but because we have 10 acres in Indiana, I mow a lot of grass. And when I can unwind and mow grass, and it's that quiet time, it allows me to kind of just debrief from the week and, talk to God while I'm mowing, pray for the neighbors while I'm mowing. And it's just a really wonderful way to unplug.
So while you're on the tractor, I assume, or riding lawnmower, you're being intentional where you're not listening to music, you're not listening to podcasts. It's not about more consumption of information. Instead, it's just a moment of pause where you're praying, you're thinking, reflecting, whatever it may be that day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't use any earbuds, and I'm just, mindful in my time. And it takes me probably 2.5 hours, to mow, to have that, solitude time.
Man, what lucky neighbors to get prayed for 2 hours. Man.
I got a long list.
Man, that's good. Do you have other moments throughout your day? I mean, obviously that's mowing the yard, that's on the weekend, but throughout your day that you're really kind of leaning into that power of pause where you are unplugging?
Yeah, the first thing I do in the morning is about setting my intention for the day. Archie Stokes, he's the one that told me about when you're in the morning, you have to ask yourself, what's your emotional weather forecast today? So my morning does not start out by watching news or grabbing my phone and flipping through social media. I haven't watched the news in many, many years. I don't want to start my day out that way. And so I really have that power of pause in the morning when I am doing my gratitude. I'm praying for other people. The church I go to, in our app, I read scripture and I read journaling where people are talking about that scripture to help me understand it. And then we get the opportunity to pray for others that have submitted prayers. I get to do a prayer request. And then you also list your gratitude for the day. And sometimes it's gratitude, sometimes it's an image. The app just prompts those conversations. And that's how I start my day before diving into work. And that's that quiet time in the morning really allows me to be able to set intention for the day and not be in a whirlwind. I'm not, immediately looking at work emails first. And so I really cherish that sweet, quiet time. And that prayer time is really where I can, hear from God. In a small group, we meet every Sunday and we talk about hearing from God. And I asked myself many years ago in my prayer time, I'm like, God, why do I have to pray when you already know my prayers? And he very clearly answered. He goes, because then you're quiet enough to hear me.
Oh, cool. That's great. What are you hearing from God right now?
Yeah, it's really this most beautiful thing. Right now, it's just be a light, right? That's really what he's put on my heart, is be a light. And all the talents and skills that I've equipped you with, those are given to you to be able to serve others and being able to do that. And anyone that reaches out that wants to talk about entrepreneurship or marketing or mindset, I always make time for those conversations, and they're always fruitful, and I love doing it. And so it's in those moments where I absolutely see him show up.
And so good at that quiet time so you can hear me, so you can actually hear. I launched a challenge, and we just launched it yesterday. And one of the things kicked off with our big group coaching call was pretty awesome. But this idea of, in John, the first words that John captures Jesus talking about is, what are you seeking? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of Jesus just showed up to you or I. How would we answer that? What are you seeking? Like, what is that answer? And to your quiet time about, so God can whisper into us, but it's also so we can just call out what we're even thinking about, what we want, because we got so much that I want my business, I want my health, I want this, that maybe if we just boiled it down and we can just, in a quiet time, we can hear from God, discern what it is we actually want. What are we seeking?
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. Right. Ask and you shall receive. And a lot of us aren't asking because we're fearful of asking.
Oh, we think it's selfish. We've been told, don't ask. That's selfish. You go help others, serve others.
Yeah, it's so true. And I really struggled that in my early days of my faith journey of, well, shouldn't I kind of live in this, lower level, lower capability, and kind of servant, poverty, scarcity mindset. And Mary Miller, who I'm sure you know, is, just a fantastic coach. And she's just like, no, God wants abundance. He wants to be able to provide. And she's like, think about like how excited your son is and lit up when he gets to do something that's in his wheelhouse, or he gets to, enjoy something. And the same for God watching you, right? When he's gifted you with something and you're abundant with it, really changing. And I know you talk about that in your book. And I love that when you're talking about head trash and about, the scarcity versus abundance mindset. And I really struggled with that because I didn't grow up with money. And we filed bankruptcy when I was 12 and we lost our house. And I was a child of the 80s. So lots of people lost their houses back then. That I didn't understand that. And so therefore, any dollars I got, I would kind of squirrel them away. Well, as a business owner, you can't lead a business like that. You can't do that. And so when I was able to shift and understand my money story and move that into an abundance story, that God, if you give it to me, I'm going to give it right back out. And so being able to have that mindset and allowing like all of my team members to show up in their zone of genius because I've given them freedom to do so and pay them handsomely for it. I've had team members literally brought, their first home this year and, and got just the sweetest, thank you of like, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And like, I see him in all of those opportunities and I'm like, God, give me, because I'm going to push it right back out.
What was the key moment, the tipping point for you to go from that scarcity mindset to that abundant mindset? I know listeners want to know, but I selfishly want to know.
Yeah. And it really was. And so I've had a coach for the last 8 years, and it's just been absolutely a huge pivot point for me. And so when we really started understanding how my brain works, that, how it shows up and the stories that I'm telling myself, and then reframing those stories, understanding the power. And so when I let go and shifted from scarcity to abundance, it was really about control. I was fearful. I was in fear of, okay, well, this is my business. My name is on it. It's my reputation on the line. If it doesn't get done right, then it's going to come back, on me. And I was stifling the business, literally choking the business, because there's only so many hours in a day. So when I let go and started bringing others into my business and growing the team, my business took off. It literally grew 300%. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, I encourage them. I'm like, if someone could have told me sooner to go and start bringing people into your business sooner. And when I say bring people, day one, it doesn't have to be a full-time employee. It can be contractors, so being able to get things done and then grow into full-time and making those steps was huge for me. And that's really where my business shifted. And I was able to show up in that abundance way and allow others to be in their zone of genius and then allow them to share their gifting. And it's just been absolutely incredible.
I love the word reframing and the idea of reframing. So explain that a little bit more for anyone like trying to think through, okay, I get it, reframe, but how do I do that?
Yeah, so reframing is, so our minds, right? What our brains do is it's a thought which leads to a feeling, which leads to an action or inaction. And so maybe that thought is, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not smart enough. I, am fearful, from a money standpoint, and that scarcity. So I want to reframe it and say, well, what would it look like if I had plenty of money? What could I do if I had plenty of time and money? And how could I serve and show up? And how could I provide those dollars, those extra dollars, and be a blessing to others through that abundance? And so being able to flip that, right? So then that thought, that feeling shifts, right? Because that thought was, I'm fearful, I'm in, the control issues. And then the feeling was, being able, well, I need to hang on to this. And then the action or inaction, I wasn't taking action. I was in inaction because I was fearful. And then being able to reframe that and put that into that abundance that, no, my money can help someone else's dream. And maybe God's going to use me in that way to fund someone's dream. Or I love doing, just spot blessings. Maybe there's an interaction or an encounter with someone at the grocery store where, someone in front of me, she started putting items back because she had, so much budgeted for her grocery bill. And I leaned over and paid for the whole thing. And it was God put that on my heart. And that was such a cool opportunity. Had I been in scarcity, I would have never done that before. And being in abundance and it's his money, it's not my money. And so putting me in places where I could do those blessings it's just so overwhelming.
That's great. That thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions. I've heard it's one more added to it, leads to results, right? So your thoughts, feelings, actions. Bob Proctor came up with that years ago. And I know where a lot of people, and this could be myself as well, but for other listeners, is a lot of us started at results. We look at the results, we look at the month revenue, we look at the money in our bank account, we look at the pounds on the scale, we look at the results, and then from there, we go to our thoughts. Well, depending on what we're looking at, those thoughts very often can be bad. I had a bad revenue month, which lead to bad feelings of this is never going to work out, which obviously, what does that do? That leads to bad actions. If you don't think it's going to work out, you're going to have cruddy engagement, and therefore, it is a self-fulfilled prophecy. You come right back around, and guess what? You have bad results because you didn't do anything because you were moping in self-pity party. So it's back to starting with the thoughts, reframing, having positive thoughts, which I know for some listening are probably thinking, it's all kind of make believe or hey, just start believing positive thoughts. But it is a little bit of by thinking it, science shows we actually act differently and we show up better. And it's kind of the whole law of the mirror idea where if I'm showing up better, the prospect, the client, spouse, they feel our energy, and therefore they can be more responsive.
Yes, exactly. And you're right. So many people are like, oh, that sounds really woo-woo, and that doesn't seem faith-based. And I'm like, no, capture your thoughts is all throughout the Bible.
Yes, hold every thought captive. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. And so when we understand that our brain is just tripping us up, our brain is like in fear mode because, in the early days, we had to worry about being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. We don't have to be in that fear place anymore, right? And understanding that fear is just false evidence appearing real, right? False evidence appearing real. And our brain is just in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. Our brain is just panicking in that situation. And when we're able to reframe those thoughts and really look, and you said energy. Everything is about energy. And when I say that, I get a lot of strange looks. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you a point about energy. Have you ever been in a room and you felt like someone's looking at you? And then you look up and they're looking at you. That's energy. They're sending energy out and you received it, right? And or if someone's close to you and you can just feel like their presence close to you, that's energy. And so what energy we put out when we send an email, the energy we put out when we create a piece of content, that energy when we put out on those calls, it is felt on the other end, right? Like how many times have you been on potential sales call with someone and, on the other end, you can tell the person's just having a terrible day. Their voice is low. Like literally in my early days of sales, they would put mirrors up in our cubes and say, are you smiling while you're dialing?
Yes. It's so true. Because they can feel it on the other side. No, it's a great example of someone looking to you at the across the room or the intersection or wherever it may be. Definitely. Kendra, great stuff. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And then last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. A question I like to ask people, because there's a big pivotal moment in my life. Is there a moment in your life where you had to hand over your story for a greater story? Kind of the Kendra show had to be over. It's time to hand it over to God and what he has in store for you.
Oh, yes. How long you got?
We can do a part 2 if it's a long story. Go for it.
Yeah. So I always say, where all this confidence comes from now and this amazing joy-filled life and gratitude life that I have is because I came from a really hard place. So 15 years ago, I went through divorce. I was massively depressed. I was under, depression for over 6 years. And it was the darkest time. It was super isolating. And, oh, by the way, was also failing in my business, right? Like all of it was crashing down. And I'll never forget, like driving to a church parking lot and just saying, I surrender. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And being able to make that shift. And I'll never, ever forget that. And from that moment, I sought out a small group at church. I'd never done that before and went to a stranger's house and spilled my guts with strangers in a small group at church. And that was the first time I had felt really deeply loved in a long time. And so that story led to so much healing over the last 15 years. And so that's why I'm really vocal about it, because like we look at each other going, gosh, she's got it all figured out or he's got it all figured out. I'm like, no, you don't know how I had to scratch and claw and heal to get to where I am today. And that's why I'm super open about talking about it, because I wish I'd had that spoken to me 15 years ago when I was in such a dark place.
Yeah. And I did not know that story and like to unpack a little bit more. But I guess two things or 2 points on what you just said is that people look at somebody and say, "Oh, they've got it all together," and then your comment of, "Hey, I had to come through kind of the valley shadow of death there at a time in my life." I'd say that's true for a lot of us. Like we all have these different stories, but also in the moment, like even if you look like you've got it all together, there are still those down days. There are still those tough days, and there's a comment I say almost all the time with clients or close friends is that someone will share something on a Zoom call or a coaching call, and they literally will say something like, "I'm probably the only one dealing with this." It's like, no, you're not alone. And so I think there's kind of two parts to that. One is yes, we've all kind of came through some crap at some point in our life, but then there's these small micro losses each day we feel that we've got to pick ourselves back up. We've got to spend time on the tractor just praying. We've got to get up and do journaling and reflecting because that's what kind of keeps us in the game. Otherwise, the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And if
Yes.
we are not armored up each day, then it can happen.
Totally agree. And so your mindset is like a muscle, just like, exercise. We also have to create a daily practice of gratitude, of looking and seeking those little small moments, those God wink moments, hearing a child laugh at the grocery store, or just those little moments, maybe a smile or a stranger holding a door for you, right? Those little moments. And when we get out of alignment is when those hard times seep in. And what it looks like to identify what out of alignment looks like, I call it look for the wobble. So the wobble is when you're short with your spouse, you're short with your animal, something irritates you that normally wouldn't, for me, like dishes piled up near the dishwasher, but not in the dishwasher, right? When those little things are irritating you, they really shouldn't. So to me, looking for those wobble moments says, hey, you haven't been doing your daily practice, or hey, you need to take a time out yourself. Maybe you need a nap. Maybe you need to call a friend. Maybe you need to read a book. Maybe you're hangry. Maybe you just need to eat something, whatever it is, but truly stopping and ask yourself, okay, what do I need right now that I've allowed myself to kind of get in this wobble? Because my normal isn't being short with my spouse or my animal or being frustrated over dishes, laying there. And so catching that wobble before it becomes an explosion, because what happens is we don't catch those wobbles and we're out of alignment. And we just kind of allow that to fester. And then we go into those explosive, states because we didn't stop in those moments and truly ask ourselves, what do I need right now? I just need to take a walk. What do I need to, unplug and readjust?
Yeah, it's not the straw that broke the camel's back. It is everything leading up to it, whether there's no margin in our lives, we've said yes to way too many things, or, whatever it could be. And I like the idea of look out for the wobble, because with the dishes example, a lot of times we point to the other person. It's their fault. It's their fault. And it's like, no, what about me? I know with clients, and when we start, sometimes when marriage gets brought up, or maybe it's a teenage and kid or whatever, or even it's a coworker that they're being a pain. It's, hey, we can't fix the other person. We can start with ourselves. So let's start with ourselves. If it's a spouse, let's spend some time in prayer, praying about them. I have people write out, what are 10 things you're grateful for your spouse? And it kind of helps. I have to do that occasionally for Holly if I'm in a funk. But it helps. And it's just changing that posture that we can't go fix somebody. So when we look out for the wobble, it's, hey, what can I do in this situation? How can I respond differently and handle it? I like the phrase, look for the wobble. I like simple phrases. That's fantastic. Your story is inspiring from the standpoint you had money battles early on, so some scarcity mindset, then the divorce, and so some abandonment feelings, and then both those you've rebounded from, reframed from, and able to pursue entrepreneurship, business owner, being a wife, being a mother, now with an abundance and more of a community aspect. I love how you just have totally transferred all of that.
Yeah, it's just been an incredible story. And there's many times where I'm just brought to joyful tears. I'm like, holy moly, I can't believe this is my life now compared to where I was 15 years ago.
So what would you say to that listener who is in that depressed, struggling with anxiety? I think I'm going to be here in this valley of shadow of death forever. What would be what you'd share with them?
Definitely, and you said it, you're not alone. There's so many of us that struggle, with that. And really getting back to me, and I'm just speaking to my own personal, when I was fighting depression feeds off of isolation. So the best thing you can do is get out and find community, find someone else, to be able to lean on, find a group to get involved in, to be able to start speaking and kind of crawl out of that isolation. And then, anxiety is more forward thinking, it's future thinking. And we're playing the what ifs. Well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what I asked is the reframe, instead of, just the what if from a negative, flip it to the what if something amazing happens because you leave the house today? What if something amazing happens because you pick up the phone and have that conversation that you were fearful happening? And so being able to really flip that script. One of my favorite books on this topic is Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen. I've read it 3 times. I did a book study on it. It's a fantastic book, and it talks about how our brains are wired, the reframing aspects, and it's just a fantastic read.
Anxiety, what is the future negative? The opposite of that's obviously hope. Looking at the future of positive. And I think that's a good word for all of us as we go into 2022, is how could this be a year of hope? Hope for our marriage, hope for our families, hope for our parent-kid relationship, hope for our business, because it has been a scarcity mindset just due to whether it's circumstances or whatever surrounding us. But for all of us to adopt that idea of hope.
Absolutely. And it's just a learning process. All of it is. We're all learning. And we're always, going to be evolving. And if we look at it like that, it doesn't feel as scary when we're just like, hey, we're all learning. Nobody's got it all figured out.
How do you continue to have a positive outlook on the future, whether it's business growth, it's revenue? I mean, all right, great. Let's have the word of hope for 2022. How can we do that?
Just leaning into him and trusting him, right? He's the provider. He's the one that's going to show up. And so we really just have to lean into him and where he's guiding us. And it's really those little steps of obedience. I feel like we're all just puzzle pieces, and my puzzle piece may help someone else's puzzle piece. And so being able to, share our gifts and our talents and being able to be those puzzle pieces to each other and freely sharing those puzzle pieces. And I feel like it's in those steps, those obedient steps. We don't need to have all the steps figured out. I don't need to know exactly where I'm going to be, a year from now, 5 years from now. I need to be obedient. And so what does that look like? Think about it like your headlights at night in your car. You only see so far out when you move. So you have to move. And I think a lot of people get in that analysis paralysis and they're paralyzed and they don't move, but they keep saying, well, this keeps happening, that keeps happening, but they aren't taking any action. And so reminding ourselves that, no, you're the vehicle and you're going to be shown more. God asked us just to take a step. He didn't ask us to figure out what years are going to be like from now. We don't know. But if we're obedient in our steps, other things show up when we just take small steps.
Yeah, if God gave us the 3-year strategy, we would say, all right, God, see ya. I'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah, it would be super scary, checkup. Right? Yeah. Like had God, told me, early on in my life, hey, oh, by the way, I'm going to make you go through, divorce. I'm going to make you go through depression. I'm going to make you go through a failed business. I would have been like, I'm never getting married then if that's the case, right?
Yes.
Had laid that on my heart, I would have never. But now I'm so grateful for every single thing, all the valley and mountain moments, right? From those valley moments, I had beautiful mountain moments, and there'll be other valley moments in my life, but I hang on to hope that there's going to be another mountain moment right after that.
Absolutely. We should just end on that right there. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Kendra?
I'm super easy to find in social media under Kendra Ramirez, or you can visit us at kendraramirez.com.
Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, same here. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at corymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.